With the offseason in our rearview mirror, Birds 365 is ready to tackle the 2023 Eagles season. You got McMullen and McDonald to break it down for you, and we tap into our friends, our guys that we know the Birds as well as we do. We'll do that early here today with Jeff Knox from Inside the Eagles, IGGLES.com. Jeff Knox, you ready to go back to work?
I'm ready to go back to work. I actually took the wrong time to decompress. I thought I had some time to make some flight plans, schedule the rest of my summer. I come back to work this morning, and we got Zach Martin decide he wants to sit out of camp, and Saquon Barkley's back at camp, and Twitter calls itself X now. So I had to do some catching up.
Yeah, we got to give that out. The first time yesterday, Jeff, I had to say, follow certain guest on X. Doesn't feel right. Doesn't feel right at all. But yeah, that'll take some getting used to. Training camp, not as much getting used to now that we know how Nick Sirianni, the Eagles, have done it, which I think is an organizational decision, not just the head coach yet, but 9 training camp practices. Then you'll have 2 with the Cleveland Browns. You'll have 1 with the Indianapolis Colts, our old friends, Jim Schwartz and Shane Steichen coming back. But boy, not a lot. But it's hard to criticize this team. I mean, they're successful with it. How do you take the lack of work, on-field work?
I feel like if there was ever a time to alter the game plan slightly, this would be the year to do it. Two new coordinators on both sides of the ball. We actually have the 9 practices, as you mentioned, but I think this would be the time to do it. That first game last year against the Detroit Lions, we saw some fatigue during parts of the second half and during parts of the first half as well. But looked like the Detroit Lions were a little bit more ready to play than we were. I was listening to you guys' conversation with John Clark yesterday, and he was discussing the Kansas City Chiefs game and Kansas City's decision to put Tyreek Hill in the slot. And that caused us some issues because we didn't have a dime package. So many moving parts, losing 5 starters on defense. I believe in Nakobe Dean, but I'm not exactly sure if we're going to see the same type of production from Nakobe Dean in year 1 as a starter that we saw from TJ Edwards. So again, as you mentioned, John, it's kind of hard to criticize what's done based on the results that we've seen over the past couple of years, but I'm a little nervous, and I guess I'm just pessimistic by nature, but I feel like this would be the time to alter the game plan if we were going to do it.
All right, I'll let you continue to be pessimistic if you so choose. Do you think part of it is, and I fear there's at least a little bit in there with this, that the Eagles like being smarter than everybody else? That part of why they do what they do is because we're going to do it differently because we're smarter than you. If that's the case, shame on the Eagles. And I'm not saying it's a big case, but do I think it's in the back of the mind of some of the people who are deciding these things? Yeah, I do. Am I being fair or am I just being a jerk?
No, I think you're right, actually. And based on the results, they might actually be proven they're actually smarter than everybody else. The results always justify the means to some extent, and it actually proves why they're doing what they're doing. They're not walking into seasons with injuries and a whole lot of concerns and things of that nature. Everybody seems to be equipped with what they need to do to get themselves into successful positions, and the coaches are doing exactly what you ask coaches to do. They're putting players in the best players to be successful, and then you ask players to make plays when they're asked to do so. And I think about guys like Reed Blankenship, one of 3 undrafted rookies to make the roster last year, and when he got his opportunity, he was ready to go. So though I use words like pessimistic and everything, I still trust the team, and I know they know more about what they're doing than I do.
To sort of further Jody's point, but extend it to personnel. Geoffrey, I look at running back, and I see a lot of people lauding the Eagles for building a running back room from a financial standpoint that equals Miles Sanders' deal, which is true. You should laud them for that.
Right.
But that's not the same thing as on-field production. And they lost a 1,269-yard rusher. And I hear this, we'll just use a committee. The problem with the committee, and Nick Sirianni kind of hinted that to us, is, well, in theory, I like to call it off-season talk. In theory, you check the box. Well, this guy can do this guy can do that. But in real life, if you're saying, oh, Rashad Penny's on the field, we're going to run the ball. DeAndre Swift is on the field, third down, we're going to pass the ball. Hurry up, we're going to go to Kenny Gainwell. You're giving the opposing defense a neon sign. This is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to do. And if you try to sort of trend bust, throw the football to Penny, make DeAndre run it too much, make Kenny Gainwell run it too much, then you give them an advantage by making guys do boxes they don't check. So it all comes down to production on the field. Howie Roseman did a great job building a room from the salary cap standpoint, but that doesn't translate into they're going to run for 1,269 yards like Miles Sanders. Are people skipping an important step and saying, the money ball aspect is great unless they don't produce?
What you're saying makes a lot of sense. I'm actually go the other way. I actually think that you actually will have the same type of production, but you will see it from three different guys, because we kind of saw that in the earlier stages of Miles Sanders' career. We saw a mix of him and Jordan Howard on certain seasons. And then last year, we also saw the same thing with Miles and mixing in Boston Scott from time to time. I think it'll be fine. I think the thing that worries me most is injuries and things of that nature. What happens if we have DeAndre Swift go down? What happens if Rashad Swift goes down? Because history tells us that they will at some point. They're just not going to play 17 games. But the combination of all four, I think, works in conjunction with each other. I honestly don't know if Rashad Penny can't catch the ball out of the backfield. He just maybe not have been asked to do it, but I think he probably has a skill set, because I think overall, when you judge the talent of this room, I think he might be the most talented, but in some ways also the most fragile. But I also trust the offensive line and Jeff Stoutland as the run game coordinator as well. So I think he'll make some great things happen. And I also trust Brian Johnson, because though he's gotten a lot of discussion as to whether or not the offense is going to slack off to some degree with Shane Steichen moving on to Indianapolis, I still feel like I trust him, because he doesn't have to come in and, though he'll put his stamp on the offense, he doesn't have to come in and do a whole lot of change into what's already been done. Just continue to ride things the way they are. You don't actually have to alter too much of what's done, and he's actually been in the room with these guys when the game plans were done. So I think we're going to be fine in that aspect. I just worried about injuries, and fingers crossed we don't have any. And if so, maybe we're in a situation where we see we might actually see Trey Sermon step into the lineup and get a few more carries and show what he's capable of doing as well.
And the coach, we know, likes Trey Sermon. We'll see if Trey Sermon can actually make this team and be a contributor. Not sure the coach is going to win that battle. But the Eagles did rush 147 yards a game last year, fifth most in the NFL. So the bar's pretty high. I'm with you, Jeff. I think the rushing game will be fine this year. I don't think they're going to have too tough a time replacing Miles Sanders. All right, Jeff, I want to ask you about some young guys. You mentioned Blankenship and the fact that he had to jump in last year due to injury, but he did, and he got the job done and is at least penciled in as a starting linebacker this year after being an undrafted guy to being a starter in year two. Pretty good meteoric rise for him. But just in general, since Nick Sirianni's taken over, I would say the Eagles have gone slowly with rookies. They haven't force-fed rookies. They like developing rookies, and the only reason why Blankenship played was because of injury last year. Otherwise, I don't know that he gets to start any games. Same thing this year. The key guy for me, the measuring stick guy, is going to be Sidney Brown and the competition that he'll be in with safety. Do you think the Eagles will try and avoid the startup costs of starting a rookie at safety game number one?
I think the best thing to do game number one is probably go with the established guys. Terrell Edmonds and Reed Blankenship was here last year, so he's more familiar with what's going on. I think we'll see a lot of Sidney Brown at some point because, as you mentioned, the Eagles have a tendency to believe they're smarter than everybody else, and they want to prove to you, sometimes to their own detriment, that we're just going to put these guys out on the field and everything because we invested these types of draft capital into them. Looking back at some of Sidney Jones' college highlights, he doesn't seem to be the cover guy that I would like him to be. He seems more like the box guy, and Terrell Edmonds seems like he's a box guy as well. So My concern would be what happens when these guys are asked to play coverage and things of that nature. And again, like we mentioned with Rashad Penny and catching the ball out of the backfield, that's not to say that he can't do it. I just don't see a lot of evidence as to where he was asked to. But Sidney Brown at some point, but I think as you said, they bought themselves a little time with a decently constructed roster. Going into training camp, they got 5 safeties on the roster, and they typically keep 5. We're forgetting Justin Evans to some degree. He's not Brian Dawkins or Malcolm Jenkins by any means, and never will be, but he's solid enough to get the job done if called upon, I believe. And Kayvon Wallace, I guess, being the weak link there, because regardless of how long he's been here, we just keep bringing guys in and we just keep stacking guys in front of him and pushing them further down the depth chart. But it's possible he makes this team as well. And maybe we can even go the route with some of the conspiracy theorists. Like, John, I hear you joke around a lot about how we tend to feel like we're just going to cure certain ills by just placing guys in positions that they never played before. And I've actually started seeing rumors about Keely Ringo and why can't we just put him in safety, which is a totally different position than what he's played.
Yeah.
But
I don't know where people come up with this stuff sometimes.
Can't see Keely playing safety there, Johnny Mac?
No, I can't.
Just checking.
They think he's going to be a really good cornerback, and the last thing they want to do is, put that on his plate as a rookie. Yeah, it's bizarre. I heard the same thing with Nolan Smith playing all-ball linebacker. A lot of people say, well, Nolan's better than Nicholas Morrow. No, he's not. Not as a weak side linebacker. He's a better edge rusher than Nicholas Morrow is a weak side linebacker.
Right.
But, you put bad things happen. Bad things tend to happen. So I don't get it, Geoffrey. Explain that to me from a fan base perspective. Like, all right, Keely Ringo's a tremendous college player. I think that plays into it as well.
I blame Madden. I think Madden has confused people into thinking that they can coach because they can run up a score on Madden pretty well, and they feel like because of overall ratings, we can just place Cam Jurgens over at right guard and see what happens and things of that nature. And those are the kind of questions I sit around and ask myself, like, if Cam Jurgens is supposed to be the right guard, and we know that we're not going to see a whole lot of Jason Kelce in the preseason, and we know that Jason Kelce is probably not going to practice a lot at practice, how is Cam Jurgens going to get the necessary snaps at right guard to actually compete with Tyler Steen?
Yeah, I brought that up. That's interesting because, there's only 9 practices. So what are we going to say? 2 maintenance days for Kelce minimum.
Right.
And in those that, again, we haven't been there yet. We'll be there for the first time tomorrow. But in the OTA that Jason took off, Cam was playing center. And that was interesting to me. And I brought it up to Jody because I'm like, you got a bunch of guys who can play practice. You can play center. You got Brett Toth. You got Cameron Tom. Not that they're great players, but they can hold down the fort for a practice. Right. If you want to get Cam Jurgens as many reps as possible as the starting right guard. But they went the opposite route. They said, nope, we're going to move Cam over to center, let Tyler Steen. So you can look at that both ways. You could look at that like they're really trying to get Tyler Steen ramped up, or you can look at it as they have so much confidence in Cam Jurgens, just toggling back and forth. And I don't have the answer yet, but it is interesting. It's going to be one of the more interesting positions to look at training camp because Tyler Steen's changing positions. He played right tackle at Vandy. Yeah. He played left tackle at Alabama. He's never played guard before. So a lot of it is projection. You mentioned Sidney Brown. He was a box safety at Illinois. The Eagles focused on his ability to play in the post because that's what they want to do. And that's the difficult part, projection. Can these guys do it? And they better, get it right at some point. But I think you're 100% right. It's the Jurgens stuff is interesting to me. It really is.
It really is. And I know I got us off subject a little bit here and everything. The original question was about safeties and stuff. But to answer that question, I feel pretty good about safety, just a little worried about them in coverage. we'll see as far as Sidney Brown is concerned. I think Justin Evans will be a little bit more productive. Maybe not.
I'm glad you brought up Justin Evans.
Justin Evans makes the team. We don't bring a guy in late.
The Eagles like him more than maybe the fan base realizes. Right. You made a bold prediction. He's going to make the team. He's got a real chance to make the team. I think most people look at him and say, he's not going to make the team. I think he's got a real chance to make the team.
So do you think they're actually going to keep 5 safeties, 6 safeties?
If
Evans is going to make it, is Wallace going to make it?
Special teams.
I think Kayvon would be in trouble. I think it's Kayvon versus Justin Evans. And I think if you're forced me to bet today, I'd probably bet on Justin Evans.
And in that case, if they do that, I would probably have Kayvon as the odd man out as well and stuff. And then if we bring a guy in late, like a day before the season starts, I think we're also talking about maybe doing some little bit more shifting. But I think you're right. I think Justin Evans is a little bit better than people give him credit for.
And here's one thing I absolutely don't know. If either you guys know, please tell me. Justin Evans is a special team player. Been around a little bit. I don't know if he's any stalwart. Okay, never played special teams, because I will give Kayvon that much. He was a pretty good special teams player. The Eagles special teams wasn't great last year. It wasn't because of Kayvon Wallace. I thought he was actually okay at it. If you go with a guy like Evans and Kayvon Wallace is not here or on the practice squad or whatever else, again, I have some concerns that the importance of special teams, kind of like running backs and linebackers, has been de-emphasized.
Oh, yeah. It has. It has been de-emphasized.
The days of Dave Phipp are gone. I miss that guy. Yeah. He turned special teams into a weapon. We show up in New England. We got guys scoring on punt returns. We blocking punts. I'm seeing kickoffs returns.
Yeah,
sometimes.
I was just looking at, because I was doing my special teams preview for Sports Illustrated, and I was just looking at Rick Gosselin's ratings and PFF's ratings, Jeff, and the Eagles are bottom 5. Nick Sirianni always says you never want to be bottom 5 in anything. That was the only thing they were bad at, really, special teams pretty consistently. You know who was number 1 by PFF? Detroit Lions, Dave Phipp. There's a correlation there, but part of it's personnel as well.
Guys here.
Back in I think we had you frozen for a little bit, Jody, but back in the Phipp days, and really even farther to John Harbaugh, to be honest.
Right.
The Eagles would always keep 1 or 2 players specifically because they were great special teams players, whether it was Chris Maragos, Brian Brayman's, Najee Good, even really good special teams players that probably weren't going to be able to help you that much at different positions. They don't do that anymore. So to Jody's point, maybe Kayvon was one of their best, he was one of their best special teams players last year. That's not as important to the Eagles anymore. Maybe it should be.
I was going to say,
they've proven.
I was okay with that until the Kansas City Chiefs took the ball inside and 10 Super Bowl on a punt return. Then all of a sudden, everybody worried about special teams coverage. Yeah, you like to say, Johnny Mac, nobody worries about stopping the run until they have to stop the run. Right. Same thing with special teams. Until somebody makes a big play against you, it's only special teams. Yeah.
There's no Maragoses anymore. I mean, there aren't. They just don't do it. And maybe they should. But, they kind of tried it with Kyron Johnson, who was a good special teams player in college, but he didn't really stand out. I think that's and he's on the bubble this time around. They kind of moved him from edge rusher to off-ball linebacker, but really he's a special teams player. Zach's very good at special teams. Josh Jobe was pretty good. Christian Ellis, I should mention, first and foremost, was really good. Other than that, I mean, bottom 5. Nick says you can't be bottom 5. Well, they were bottom 5 in special teams.
Are you feeling like Josh Joe's production on special teams gives him a realistic shot at making the roster again this year and everything? Because I keep looking at the cornerbacks and I don't know who I'm keeping and who I'm not. There are days I actually look at the cornerback room and I'm keeping Rick Williams off the team.
You know, corner's interesting because you got the 3 proven guys, right? And then they just have a boatload of guys who really have some upside for the first time in a long time because they've always struggled with cornerback depth. And Ringo's going to make the team. McPherson's going to make the team. So that's 5 right there.
Yeah.
I think they're going to keep 6 corners. And yeah, I would say Josh Jobe is the leader in the clubhouse for that 6th spot. But then I'll go one further, Jeff. You know, people kind of forget you got a 16-man practice squad. I expect Eli Ricks to be here. I expect Mekhi Gardner to be here. They'll get them through waivers. So they're going to keep a bunch of those guys, whether it's on the 53 or the practice squad. The key is Greedy Williams. You know, I don't see a spot for him, and that's pretty good. You know, that's a former 2nd-round pick. And if he can't make your team, that's a good sign. The cornerback is not where I'd be worried, but I'll turn it that way, and I'm getting too worried. Linebacker, that's where I'm worried. The Eagles have taken this too far at linebacker. I agree. They should devalue the position, but not to the level they have.
I totally agree with that. And again, I know Jody is a big we've been talking about this for probably about 2 years now. Jody is a huge Nakobe Dean guy. He actually talked me into the Nakobe Dean thing because I think our first conversation about him, Jody, I was saying that I thought he was the product of maybe playing with some great teammates and things of that nature. And I know we have that discussion too much about every position, like including Jalen. Like we always tend to feel like it's a flaw for great players to have great teammates.
Yeah, it's not their fault.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
But Nakobe Dean, I think the worst of Nakobe Dean we'll see it maybe the first half of the season, but I think he'll settle in, and I think he's a guy that can get skinny. He's a guy that can kind of get off blocks pretty quickly. He's athletic enough to get around guys and things of that nature. I've seen him get through holes in the line that I didn't think were there. So I think reproducing what they did at Georgia and everything with Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter on the line, I think he'll be fine. But I think the worst of him we'll probably see in the first half of the season. I think he'll then settle down and he'll be okay. But maybe a slight drop off at middle linebacker because I don't think I see him leading the team in tackles like we saw from TJ Edwards a year ago. And I don't see Nicholas Mullins being Kaiser White.
Hold on. Let me interrupt there.
If
not Nakobe Dean, who?
I don't know.
Who's going to lead the Eagles in tackles?
I got a lot of questions about this defense.
I'll take Nakobe Dean. I'll give you 3 picks, Jeff. I'll give you 3 guys. I'll take one. Yeah. I'll take Nakobe Dean. You can take the next 3 Eagles you want to choose for who leads the Eagles in tackles this year for a Diet Coke.
Can I take the field? Can I take Nicholas?
I'm not going to give you every defensive player, but I'll give you 3 choices to my one. I'm taking a kid who got all of 34 snaps last year, and I'm suggesting he's going to lead the Eagles in tackles and give you your choice of the next 3.
I'm going to put Nakobe in the top 3 because I think he's going to be, like I said, I think he's slight enough. I think he's athletic enough. I think he's smart enough to get some things done. But even though you're not going to let me do it, Jody, I'm going to go ahead and take the field anyway because I really don't know. I do have a lot of concerns.
Well, I will say this. If Jody's wrong and Nakobe Dean doesn't lead the team in tackles, it's because he's hurt. But I will say, who cares? It's not about the defense is designed to funnel, plays to the middle linebacker and the weak side linebacker, and those guys clean up. The key is that tackle 2 yards down the field or 7 yards down the field.
Right.
So Nakobe's going to lead the team in tackles, but I don't think that's relevant, as far as how he plays. TJ Edwards played very well. It's not about that he led the team in tackles. It's about he played very well. And Kaiser White was competent at times. And sometimes a little bit more than that.
Yeah,
depending on where he was in the season.
Here's where I think Nakobe Dean could be better than TJ Edwards. Last year, TJ Edwards, no interceptions, no forced fumbles. Nakobe Dean at
Yeah.
Georgia was a playmaker. He was part of getting the ball turned over, and I think he can do that in the defense this year. Do I think he's going to get 159 tackles? Probably not. First thing first, to get there, you'd have to stay healthy all 17 games, like miss no snaps, which I don't know if he can do, but I'll bet you he's more of a playmaker than Edwards was last year.
Yeah, that's the hope. I mean, that's definitely the hope. And, you know, it's a bold choice because TJ played so well last year. And this contract, he got a significant contract, but it wasn't crazy. Right. And if you would have told me before free agency, $6.5 million, I said, well, the Eagles will bring him back and they'll play Nakobe at weak side linebacker, and let Kaiser White move on. Would have been my guess. And they didn't do it. It was too much. And that's where I get into the devaluation aspect of it. I get the Eagles thinking. I agree with the Eagles thinking. Chicago's a perfect example. They not only paid TJ Edwards, they paid Tremaine Edmonds. It's crazy to spend that much money at off-ball linebacker in the modern NFL. But the assumption that the Eagles have been doing this for years, and there's been more Eric Wilsons and LJ Forts than there have been TJ Edwards and Kaiser White. So what is the assumption that whether it's, and even put Nakobe aside, Nicholas Morrow, Christian Ellis, boy, I'm not confident in those guys. I'm confident in Christian Ellis as a special teamer, but that's as far as it goes.
We'll see. We'll definitely see. I think I looked at Morrow and his starts with the Bears last year and things of that nature. He seems to be somebody that could possibly be a wild card. Fingers across there, and there are also some doubts. But the one to Jody's point a little earlier about Nakobe Dean and the ability to make splash plays, I think those things are important too. But the one thing that I loved about TJ was he also did what we were just discussing a few minutes ago, where he took those. He had those 5-yard stops and prevented them from being 7 yards down the field. He was always around the ball and stuff like that. So maybe not splash plays as far as forcing fumbles and creating interceptions and turnovers and things of that nature. But down by down, I think I began to trust him and stuff. And I think as we go on, we'll begin to do the same with Nakobe. But it comes back to those 9 practices, man. It's like we're not going to have enough work in there to get them done. So maybe a couple of shootouts in the beginning of the season, and maybe some losses that we didn't account for somewhere along the line, which always happens in the Philadelphia Eagles season. And maybe some bad showings against some of the elite quarterbacks in the league. But Nakobe's got the talent and he's got the head for it. And though he's quiet, I think sometimes we forget about his work ethic and things of that nature, because sometimes we think about work ethic and we do so like John, I think I heard you say this a long time ago, but we see guys post a 5-second clip of them lifting weights and we think that they're just in the gym all day and they're not doing that.
Yeah, well, you know, one of the things, my biggest concern with Nakobe, tremendous instincts to play the position. And I'm glad John Clark, you mentioned John Clark was on the show. John brought it up because for whatever reason, I say Nakobe's really small and fans get mad at me. I don't know. They want me to lie to him or what? He's really small to play middle linebacker in the NFL. Now the game's changing. I mean, you don't have Dick Butkus anymore, but TJ was 240 pounds, really remade his body from when he got here. Really, you know, he played, Jody mentioned, he didn't play 17 games. He played 20 games, and he played basically every snap. And he's got the armor, so to speak, to handle that kind of stuff. A lot of ways, linebackers like running back, not only from the devaluation, but those are the guys that take the punishment. Those are the guys that take the punishment on the defensive side of the ball. He's undersized. That's my biggest concern with Nakobe Dean.
And he was undersized playing in the SEC against the biggest collegiate players, and he had no problems whatsoever.
Not the same, man. Not the same. As good as the SEC is, I can run down a litany of players that were great SEC players that didn't do anything in the NFL. Now, I have tremendous optimism in Nakobe Dean. I think he's going to be a good player. Is he going to be, the Eagles are hoping to play through February 11th again. It's the Super Bowl. Is he going to play 20 games? I would, if they get that far, and that's not fair. So I'll just say 17. Is he going to play 17 games at the kind of traffic TJ Edwards did? That I would take the under on. Because that durability is tough. It really is.
And that's the Eagles had that going for them last year at both linebackers positions. Kaiser White stayed on the field too, which I still, to this day, Jeff, I got a lot of shots at the Eagles today. I still fault the Eagles coaching staff for not getting Nakobe Dean more run last year. They had enough games where they were up by 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. He could have gotten more snaps than he did. But that's just, again, they were tied in the Super Bowl 10 seconds ago. You got to take a step back and look at the big picture every once in a while. But I don't care. You should have played Nakobe more last year. Running back, Knox. Johnny wrote an article for SI today, yesterday, whatever, that he thinks it's going to be a hot hand running back position, that Nick Sirianni dropped enough hints that that's the way he's going to handle it this year, that it could be any of the 5 guys, including your boy, Trey Sermon, who you referenced earlier. If someone steps up and grabs the job by the throat, don't be surprised if they get close to a Miles Sanders type role as the lead back, even though they are a back by committee on paper and on the roster as of right now. A, do you think that can happen? And B, if it happens, who's the most likely guy to do it?
Well, I did mention Trey Sermon, but John mentioned the 16-man practice squad and everything, and I think that's where we'll see Trey sit for the most part. I think I was talking about elevating him in terms of if there is an injury that we probably will see to DeAndre Swift or Rashad Penny or both. But I think 4 guys make this roster. I think it is going to be a hot hand type of idea. I think we'll also be frustrated by the middle of the season, or we'll see fans complaining because this team is airing it out a lot more than they probably like them to do it, because that's just what we do in Philadelphia and in this fan base. But I think DeAndre Swift is capable enough. I honestly don't see more than 500 rushing yards, because I was thinking, what's he going to do? And I actually started looking at the stats, and that was pretty much the average, 500. And I think 600 is where he topped out at one point. Again, Rashad Penny, I think is a monster when he can stay healthy. He hasn't been able to prove that he can do so consistently. Kenneth Gainwell, I've always liked Kenneth Gainwell. I was saying he was a steal when we took him in the 5th round a couple of years ago. So I'm just I'm kind of beating myself on the chest and doing what the Eagles do, feeling like I'm smarter than everybody else because I told everybody this. And Boston Scott as well. A huge fan of Boston. Disappointed at times that we only tend to want to use him as a weapon against the Giants, but I see a guy who runs ferociously. I see a guy who doesn't get hurt. I see a guy that can catch the ball, smart with his decision making, kind of hard for defensive linemen to see and everything, because he's, 5'3", 5'5".
Yeah, he's about 5'5".
He's a small guy. We're just gonna say that. Kind of hard to see him until he breaks over to the other side.
Same thing with Darren Sproles. People would say Darren Sproles is small. He's not small. He's short. Boston Scott is short, but he is thick and powerful. One of the strongest players on the team, pound for pound, same as Darren Sproles back in the day. I get to say it at GQ_4_Eva on X, not Twitter, on X. Make sure you follow Jeff there. Inside the Eagles, IGGLES.com. Talked a lot about the running back. We never talk about the quarterback because he's a constant. That's amazing. I won't even go down that route. But I will talk about wide receiver 3 with you, Jeff. Who do you want? Olamide Zaccheaus or Quez Watkins?
Olamide. I don't trust Quez. Quez took a step backwards last year, and I think he even admitted that. He did. And Quez came up small in too many big spots for me. I feel like even if Olamide came in and he came up small in about 3 spots, he's at least equal what Quez has done. So use Quez in emergency situations and in situations where we can just use them on streaks down the field and things of that nature. Funnel the ball to Dallas Goedert a little bit more. That should be your 3rd option in this passing attack. see what we can do with Kenneth Gainwell and DeAndre Swift in the passing game. And as you guys were talking about it, I was just sitting here thinking to myself, I'm not going to put any Eagles running backs on my fantasy team because I don't know when I'm supposed to start them.
Right.
But it's going to be an interesting year with a lot of good guys. But I'm gonna go with Olamide because as bad as the Falcons were, he was one of the guys I kept finding myself paying attention to.
Yeah,
and I think he's going to be a wonderful addition to this Eagles offense.
All right, last thing for me, Jeff, and my partner yesterday called Twitter. I don't think he called it X at the point. At that point, I think he called Twitter a cesspool.
Cesspool. Well, it is.
I did.
I
I quoted John correctly. Cesspool. Yeah. Are you going to be doing your banking with the cesspool that is X? That's like the key thing to their rebranding. They want to be able to handle your money. They want to lend you a helping hand, moving money around from account to account to account. Going to be using X to move that big Eagles money this year, Jeff Knox?
I'm a little stingy and a little fearful about doing anything with my money. If it's not in my checking account,
the word you're smart. You're a little too smart to allow something like that to happen.
Too smart.
Good idea.
And it is a cesspool. I keep finding myself going over the threads on Instagram a little bit more, and Reddit's pretty cool if you guys have a chance to check out Reddit.
What is that?
Reddit.
Nice Reddit
is the new one from Mark Zuckerberg. What else we got, Jeff? What else did you mention?
I'm starting to like threads.
I can't figure out Instagram. I show my age. I cannot figure out Instagram. I can't figure it out. I'm like, what? Somebody puts on a link and it doesn't take you to the link, and you got to go to the story. I'm out on Instagram.
Yeah, I never joined Instagram because I thought I figured it out pretty early. It's picture based. The most important thing that you do on Instagram is put up pictures. Look at his face. Would you put up pictures? No, you would not. So why the hell would I want to be on Instagram?
No, but the point is the point is players
pictures, hashtags, and engagement. That's what you're doing.
Yeah, players put stuff up there sometimes, and I can't find it, Jeff. I can't find it. Yeah. Instagram is I don't know why people use it. It's a mess.
Yeah, players do because you got the bling on, so you want to show it off. That's why you're on Instagram.
Well, I don't care
bling
about that,
here.
But when they say something
with the Mac Man, I don't need to be on Instagram.
When they say something goofy, I want to be able to link to it, and it's impossible to link to it. It just drives me nuts. Yeah, I'm sure it's very easy, but it just drives me nuts. It's not. We're showing our age, though, Jody.
Yeah. Give it a try.
I'm okay with X. They're not getting their hands on my money as X, but I'll stick with X as far as gathering
I'll
information.
stick with PayPal and Venmo and the proven commodities when it comes to money.
I'm with you on that, John. Fair enough.
Knox, great stuff. We appreciate it whenever you jump in. Time for you, me, everybody else to get back to work. Looking forward to the 2023 season. We'll have you plenty on during it. Thank you for doing it this morning.
Appreciate you guys for having me. You guys have a good morning.
Jeff Knox, Inside the Eagles. That's IGGLES.com. Good Eagle website for you to check in on a daily basis with the season about ready to get underway. All right, Johnny Mac.
We froze up. I don't know if it's just me or Jody has frozen up on everybody. So I'll continue, but we got to get to a break. And we'll be back with more Birds 365.